Chapter 3, the first introductory lesson. Did that secrecy oath earlier really relate to the Daidao? As she stepped out of the thatched hut, the deep black eyes of Lame Linga seemed to lose their light. Her body felt weightless, her steps floating unsteadily. Suddenly, a hand reached out to support her, offering a pale green pill in its palm. Li Truongto spoke gently, Boing Wen Ngung Tuk Dan, completely non-toxic, extremely mild in effect. Even an ordinary person who hasn't cultivated can take it to replenish their vital energy. Lamlin Nya timidly replied, "Thank you, senior brother." She then accepted the pill, tilting her head slightly as she placed it into her small mouth. The moment it touched her saliva, it dissolved instantly, like a sweet, refreshing spring flowing through her. Unable to resist, she let out a soft hum of relief. In just a moment, she felt much better. Lai Truongtho's large hand slowly reached out and gently patted her head. He smiled and said, "Little junior sister is truly adorable. From now on, you are also part of Tio Quin Fong. Let me first show you around so you can get familiar with the place. Once Master finishes his meditation, he will teach you the introductory cultivation method. If you have any questions while cultivating, feel free to ask me." Lam Lin Ah clasped her hands behind her back and replied softly, "Thank you, senior brother." Lai Truongto walked toward the lakeshore with his hands behind his back and called out, "Come quickly and take a look at these ornamental fish in the lake. They're quite the treasures, one of the most important assets of our Tiyu Quin Fong." Lam Lin Nga hurried to follow him, stepping onto the soft grass and tiptoeing to get a better look at the distant lake. The water was exceptionally clear, revealing schools of fish leisurely swimming and playing beneath the surface. Pointing at a few fish with 5 colored scales, Li Truongtho asked, "Look at these, aren't they beautiful?" Lam Lin Nga, captivated by the ornamental fish, nodded repeatedly and praised them without hesitation. "Yes, beautiful, very beautiful." Just then she heard senior brother whispering beside her, "Once you've cultivated your first stream of spiritual energy, we'll hold a fish feast. These 5 colored fish are a type of chub, and their meat is exceptionally delicious. Whether fried, steamed, grilled, or deep fried, they're all top-tier delicacies. Even better, eating them enhances the quality of a cultivator's spiritual energy." Lam Lin Nga furrowed her brows and asked hesitantly, "Are we really going to eat them?" Li Truongto replied matter-of-factly, "Otherwise, why would we raise them?" As he spoke, he lifted his left hand and scattered a handful of rice into the lake, calling out, "Dinner time!" Fish from all directions swam over instantly, making the lakeside lively and bustling. Seeing this, Lam Linninga's eyes lit up. Li Truongtho handed her a small cloth bag and said, "Here, this is for you. It contains fish food. If you like, you can take over the responsibility of feeding them from now on." Lam Linga happily agreed, "Yes, thank you, senior brother." She carefully poured out a bit of fish food and scattered it over the water, her movements delicate and cautious, as if afraid that dropping it too forcefully would shatter the beautiful scales of the fish. Li Truongtho stood by calmly, smiling to himself. Heh, one less chore to do every day. More time for cultivation. From this perspective, having a junior sister isn't so bad after all. As Lam Lin Nga continued sprinkling food bit by bit, the 5 colored fish formed shifting patterns beneath the water, playing without a care in the world. After a while, Li Truongtho suddenly flicked his finger. 2 small water columns shot up from the lake, and 2 chub fish were lifted into the air. With a flick of his sleeve, he gathered them into a water sphere and stored them away in his robe. Lam Lin Na stared in shock, murmuring, "Why did senior brother put the fish in his sleeve?" Lai Truongtho responded indifferently, "A gift. Don't think that just because we are a sect of immortal cultivators, the principles of social dealings are any different from the mundane world. In a moment, we'll need to go register you, and we can't go empty-handed." Lam Lin Nga blinked in confusion but still replied obediently, "I see. Thank you for your trouble, senior brother." Li Truongto smiled. "It's nothing. If you're done playing, come this way." With his hands behind his back, Lai Truongto slowly walked toward a nearby medicinal garden. Lam Lin Nga glanced at the fish still gathered around the lake, waved to them gently, and quickly followed. In the medicinal garden, Lai Chuangtho gave a brief introduction to the various precious herbs and their effects. Lam Lin Nga did her best to memorize them, unaware that her senior brother already saw her as the new caretaker of the garden. Hearing his warm, steady voice, she couldn't help but recall her mother's gentle tone. The scenery of Tuquin Peak was quite beautiful, making detailed introductions unnecessary. After taking his junior sister on 2 circuits around the thatched cottage, Lai Chuangtho summoned a white cloud and brought Lam Lin Na aboard, soaring toward the central mountain range. Lam Lin Na asked curiously, "Senior brother, can you ride an immortal crane?" Lai Chuangtho chuckled, "Of course, as long as you can master artifact flight." With a slight tap on the cloud beneath their feet, the white mist let out a soft cry and transformed into a giant immortal crane. Spreading its wings, it carried the two of them forward at a leisurely pace. Lam Lin Ya's eyes instantly sparkled. Clutching onto her senior brother's robe, she lowered her head and whispered in admiration. Lai Chuangtho said, "It's merely an illusion trick. In the future, if you want to fly within the sect, you must remember a few key rules." The young girl tilted her head in curiosity. "What rules, senior brother?" Lai Chuangtho cleared his throat and organized his thoughts. He decided to start educating his junior sister with the smaller matters first. With a serious expression, he said, "When flying in the sect, you must pay attention to your altitude. You shouldn't fly too high, but you also can't fly too low. High up in the sky, many senior experts often pass through. If you run into them head-on, it's easy to offend them. You must remember this. If one of these elders takes notice of you, there's a 50% chance they'll form a good impression and a 50% chance they'll form a bad one. If they form a good impression, you might not gain anything. But if they form a bad impression, you're bound to face trouble later. So it's best not to draw their attention at all. If you happen to see them, just pay your respects and mind your own business." Lam Lin Nga replied obediently, "Yes, I'll remember." Li Chuangtho nodded in satisfaction and continued, "On the other hand, flying too low is also a problem. You might pass over peaks where people reside. Even though the sect appears harmonious, competition still exists. Many people care about useless rankings. If you fly too low, you'll be noticed and potentially targeted. After 100 years of observation, I've determined the optimal flying altitude within the sect, between 30 to 50 zhangs from our starting point. At this height, you'll rarely encounter fellow disciples, let alone senior experts." As Lai Chuangtho continued his detailed explanations, Lam Lin Na listened attentively, committing everything to memory. She couldn't help but steal a glance at her senior brother's well-defined face. He really was quite handsome, and so meticulous, too. With senior brother's voice still gently instructing her, Lam Lin Nga finally arrived at the main peak of Do Tin Mon.